Welcome back to Making Video Your Business. Today I'm joined by my friend Jen Rylance from Help Me Fix. Jen,
Hello.
thanks for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
I wanted to get you on the podcast because I wanted to talk to you about podcasts and the value of them, and obviously visuals and things like that.
Yes.
But first things first, can you give our listeners and our viewers just a bit of background about Jen?
Yeah. So I'm Jen. Thank you for watching. And my property journey started in 2013 now. So I've been in the property industry for a while, and I originally started in sales. So I worked as a secretary. So that's kind of where my roots came from. Admin based, did that for a few years in a small family run business. I've only ever worked in kind of small businesses, which I really like. I don't see myself as a corporate girly. So did that for a while, and then I progressed and went into work for a letting agent. And I've worked for a couple of letting agents over the last few years. So I've done everything from just admin, being a lettings negotiator, doing maintenance, and also doing property management, which is kind of what I did up until what I do now, which is working at Help Me Fix as a customer success manager. So still in the industry, but on the flip side.
There's a couple of things I want to pull out of that, but what do Help Me Fix do? What is the core product that Help Me Fix do?
So we've got a lot of other exciting things that are kind of in the mix at the moment, but our core product is video triage. So what we, our founder Etan is a plumber by trade, and he felt that kind of the way that repairs were done traditionally just wasn't working anymore. So what we do is we offer not only the private renter sector, but also housing, social housing providers. We offer them essentially, we connect their tenants with qualified tradespeople over video who the aim is for them to triage their maintenance problem. So say you've got a boiler that is just not working, they'll go through the triage steps with the tenant, press this button, twist this knob, that kind of thing, with a view to hopefully resolving that problem with them without actually someone having to attend physically, but at the very least getting a diagnosis, parts, etc. So we're saving that out of hours call out or that initial visit to get that diagnosis.
Video has become quite a big part of that product.
Mm-hmm.
But if we rewind slightly, we first met each other when you used to work with my friend Zoe.
Yes.
At Belvoir in Bedford, because that's where you're based.
Yep.
Talk to me about how Zoe introduced you to video and started to press you in front of lens.
Yeah, so that was a massive part of my kind of journey professionally and just kind of personally as well. I think that, well, when I first started, I didn't know anybody kind of in the industry wide, like, you know, like yourselves, Chris Watkin. I didn't know quite how big the industry was before I actually went to work with Zoe.
UK property market influencer Chris Watkin.
Yeah, exactly. And when I got there, even in kind of my first day, she was like, yeah, we're really kind of heavy into video, we do a lot of social media, we'll try to be a little bit different, a lot of kind of local things with the community. And I was like, oh, I don't know about that, that's a little bit scary. And she was like, look, you know, we'll kind of ease you in. Didn't happen. We'll ease you in, and, you know, just, you know, but it's we want you to do it. It's kind of, we're hoping it's going to be part of the role, and, you know, you can kind of you know, develop in that journey. And yeah, it was, I remember one time she sent me a message when I was just working one day. She was like, oh, well, they've just dropped some new legislation, we're going live in 5 minutes. She was like, here's the link. And I was like absolute panic. But if you watch, they're still available on Belvoir Bedford's channel, you watch the videos, like you can see my first couple that I did, and then like slowly how I progressed, like with confidence. And then there's somewhere I'm wearing silly elf hats and tinsel around my neck and putting up Christmas trees and all sorts. And it really just not only did good for the business, but also kind of helped my confidence as well.
Did you find it difficult?
Yeah, initially. I still find it a little bit difficult now, but I think I know, like you saying, what Zoe said is, you know, just don't overthink it. You know, people like that human aspect of, you know, of a business when you're doing video for the business, and, you know, being involved in the community. You know, at the end of the day, you're a human being, and that's what people relate to. So yes, sometimes it is difficult, but it's just taking that leap and just getting it done, because actually people respond really well to it.
What do you think your kind of fears were, or the barriers, not necessarily fears, but the barriers to doing it, you know, for people? Because it's one of the biggest things, right? And it's not a man thing or a woman thing or an old thing or a young thing, right? There is this kind of innate sort of, I guess, sort of pang of like
Yeah,
uncomfortableness
everyone's like, oh my
when
gosh,
you
yeah.
get in front of a lens.
Yeah.
And what was it for you that you were like, oh, do you know what? You know, that really hurts me. What is it that do you think? Because it's one of the biggest barriers for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think initially it was, you know, what do people think? Like, am I going to do the right thing? Like, am I going to stutter? I say a lot. I still do that, to be honest. But
I've trained that out of my body.
yeah, it's really hard. But when people tell you about it as well, because I a few people watching them, oh, you say a lot, and I was like, now I'm just going to say it all the time because now you pointed it out. Actually, I'm more conscious about it. But I think initially it was just because it was something I'd not really done before.
Mm.
You know, I mean, you know, like when
The
I was a
fear of the
kid.
unknown.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't know kind of how it was going to be received, and just, you know, putting myself out there. People, you know, do I actually know what I'm doing? Are they just going to think I'm, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about, especially if it's, you know, in relation to things like, you know, legislation drops and those kinds of things, you know, and having that confidence and that knowledge, and obviously just passing it on to other people, but them actually looking at me and thinking, oh, I don't think she knows what she's talking about. And she's, you know.
I think when we started doing stuff, it was commonplace, and people look at, you know, us now, Matt and I, and my team. Actually, they're all brilliant. Actually, in front of camera as well as behind. But the guys and girls that we work with, it wasn't normal for us to be this side of the camera. It was normal for us to be the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
And this side was less. I mean, I'm not bothered because of the jobs I've had and the roles I've had to always been quite customer facing. And so I'm quite confident in a room, and that's fine. So being in front of the camera is no different, I don't think, to talking to a room full of 100, 250, you know, 10 people. But I think for a lot of people, there is that sort of uncomfortable fear of what are people going to think about me? And I think that's normal. I think it's normal to have that. I was chatting to a friend of mine the other day, and she's just been promoted and she's a bit nervous about the new job and whatever. But she shouldn't be, because she's actually brilliant. Right. And a lot of people say, oh, I've got imposter syndrome and this, that, and the other. And I go the other way and say, I think it's great. Great. Good job. Well done.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that means you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And
you care as well.
That's you really care.
Yeah, that's what me and Toby spoke about on our podcast. We do have a podcast to help me fix.
I was getting onto that.
Oh, sorry. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, that's what we discussed, is exactly that element, is it flipping it on its head, and actually it's a positive thing because it shows that you care, and it actually does show that you have that knowledge.
Yeah, but I think the imposter syndrome shows that you're pressing yourself forward, that you're putting yourself in an area, or you're putting yourself into a position where you're not super comfortable, which means you're evolving as a person, as a business person, as a professional. You're actually striving to do something a little bit different and actually trying to push yourself forward. You've gone from having this kind of fear of being in front of a lens to being forced to do bits of silly, not forced, that's not fair, because Zoe encouraged you.
Encouraged, yeah, absolutely.
Forced is the wrong word. Encouraged you to do things and push you out of your comfort zone, right? Which is actually, do you know what? You should thank her for that, because she's changed your outlook, I think, in a number of ways.
Yeah.
You've now got the Help Me Fix podcast. What is the purpose of that podcast, and why do you think it's so valuable?
So the whole idea, I'd love to say it was my idea, but actually it was our founder Etan's idea. When I was at interview stage, they said, look, obviously we've seen kind of what you've done with social media. I mean, they were on tenant advice surgery that I did when I worked at my previous agency. So they've kind of done that kind of thing with me as well. And he kind of said, look, I want us to be, because we're a supplier, a lot of times suppliers are seen as maybe not kind of knowledgeable of the industry. They're not kind of, they're in but separate. And it was really, and that's why with my guests, I talk about things not necessarily just to do with, you know, their property journey, just to do with the industry itself. It's about what they're passionate about. Obviously, we talked about visual and video with you, and it's valuable because I think it's important, even as a supplier, being knowledgeable and still very much in with that industry, and actually just talking to people, not just about, you know, what they do for a living, you know, how they got there, but actually, you know, what are your struggles? How did you overcome them? Like, what was this journey like for you? Like, obviously with Zoe, I talked about her up and leaving to, you know, Bonnie, Scotland, where she, you know, abandoned me, but not really. And, you know, and she's, you know, having a great time out there. They have a camper van business, and it's just it's really important to still be very much involved and still show that you're in with everybody else, not just separate, and obviously trying to get people to buy your stuff.
Why do you think it's so important? Why do you think visuals have become almost paramount?
Speaking for myself, it's almost having something tangible. If you can see it, it's much more relatable. Just reading something on a website, that kind of thing. It's not only is it generally it's there's a person that's doing the visual or the video or podcast, whatever it might be. So there's a person that you can relate to. So you're almost building that relationship before you've kind of got to the next stage. And I think that's really important. And I know we talk about it all the time, but it's that relationship and that trust, and just having something kind of tangible. You're not just reading some text on a website or on a screen or on an email, for example. It's that personal touch.
Often businesses hide behind logos, brands, and office fronts, and they don't put themselves into their market. And really, that's where they are successful. If we look at the most successful businesses in the world, whether it's Apple, Amazon, Tesla, whatever you think of,
Controversial.
whatever you think of Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, you know who they are.
Yeah, exactly.
You know who they are. There is a face to that logo. There is a face to that brand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no different at a local SME level. You need to be in the market. Personally, your business owners need to be in the market so that builds consumer and customer trust.
Yep.
And people understand who they're buying from. Now, when you use Amazon, you're not buying from Jeff Bezos. You're buying from thousands of different suppliers all around the world who make stuff, right? But when you think of Amazon, you think of Jeff Bezos, right? And so when you think of Help Me Fix, people need to think of you, and they need to think of your colleagues, and they need to think about who they're doing business with. The who is way more important. It's way more important than people give it value. And I think that's where visuals, personally, in my opinion, come into their own, because it leaves people with a personal view of you and your business.
Yeah, and that's where I think the podcast and just being present on social media, I've been a little bit quiet at the moment, but being present on social media, both personally and, in terms of the business pages, because I think, like you said, people by people. And if, I had a client when I first started at Help Me Fix, we had like the onboarding call, and they were like, oh yeah, I know Jen from LinkedIn. And, that was nice because actually they'd already seen me about. So whilst they'd already bought into the brand or whatever, they were confident because they knew that I was going to be with them, and they knew who I was and what I was about. And it's building that personal brand alongside your kind of company brand, because that gives people, like you said, the confidence, the trust in actually you're going to do a good job and you're going to be on their side.
I think for me that your podcast is a genius idea.
Thanks.
Why do you think podcast like this, it depends how people are consuming this, but if our podcast is visual, and obviously because we're a visuals business, but as a visual thing and an audio thing, yours is audio only.
Yeah.
Why do you think there is value in it?
I think it's with podcasts, I find I'm starting to listen to them a bit more now, and I think that or watch them. Yours, I tend to watch it because I like the visual.
Thanks,
but because it's easy to digest, I think a lot of the times it's actually quite relaxing. I know people who obviously they listen to them on runs, or they listen to them, when they're driving. They're just easily accessible.
I do it when I'm walking the dog.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you're getting that information, or whatever it might be, true crime, property, whatever. You're obviously doing something that you enjoy, or kind of getting information, or whatever it may be, but it's in such an accessible way that you're not having to kind of go, even if it's a learning podcast, or a property legislation update podcast, those kinds of things. There's lots of people who do that, and it gives you access to those people as well. And it gives you an insight into kind of how people go about their daily lives, or how they got into property, or how they got into their job, or actually, again, things they struggle with, which makes them more relatable. And I think that's why podcasts are great, because it really does, obviously they tend to delve into kind of what's going on with people, and I think that's what people relate to.
What do you think the value is in longer form content? Do you personally, as a consumer, and this is what I always say to them, is every single thing that you watch or listen to 30 seconds long?
No, absolutely not.
Exactly.
And I think for a business side of things, it's being able to use it across multiple platforms. And I think I mean that's what you guys do as well, and it's nice because for someone like me, it comes up on my TikTok all the time, or when I actually go
I'm
and
not saying
listen to
don't
an
do
episode.
short.
Yeah,
I'm saying
exactly.
do it as well
It's doing as well as, and it's giving you more kind of giving you more reach. People are seeing it more, and because it's then it's available for people where they want it and how they want it, because like I said, some people want to listen to the podcast on their morning run or whatever, but actually it gives you that visibility because someone's scrolling, might not know who you are, they scroll, ping, you're there in front of them, and it's all because maybe they saw an advert or something, and it's just accessible, and it's easier to digest.
There is this kind of misnomer that people only want short, they only want this, that, and the other. And I like short. Short for me is a flag in the ground. It's a bit like marking a big field out and saying, oh yeah, I'm going to put flag here. And but you want to have lots of flags in your field. You want to plant loads and loads and loads and loads of flags all over the field so that people can't but see your flags.
Yeah.
They can't walk past without seeing a flag.
Exactly.
Right? You need to have some longer stuff that lets people know a bit more about you. The shorter stuff should be a signpost. It should be pushing people in the direction of your longer stuff. And that's where I think people really win with their engagement and with their content. What are your top 3 tips? I ask everyone, what are your top 3 tips for getting started with video for people? Or I tell you what are your top 3 tips for getting started with podcast? Yeah. That's better, because I like to ask people for tips. So yeah, top 3 tips for getting started with your own podcast.
The first one is decide what you want it to be about, because I think you need to have, doesn't have to be concrete, super solidified,
it has
but
to have a narrative.
It has to have a bit of a narrative. So obviously for me, I decided that I didn't want to go the traditional route of how did you get into property, what's it like being a woman in property, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff, because it's done quite a lot, and there's a lot of podcasts out there. I was actually quite concerned when I started the podcast. I was like, everyone's doing a podcast at the moment, everyone's releasing one every 5 seconds. So have an idea of what you want it to follow, what you want it to look like, what kind of, maybe even what kind of guests you want to get on, maybe get the first couple initially. So you kind of got a couple of episodes or whatever in the bag. Second is find a good platform. You don't have to pay, there is free ones available, so find a platform to record and upload.
Can you give us a couple?
I use Podcastle myself. There is a free version, but the storage is limited. Or you can pay, but it's not expensive. It's about £15 a month. And I think StreamYard does it as well. That can be paid or free as well. So there's multiple different platforms you can use.
Record them on Zoom.
Yeah,
you can record them on StreamYard.
And then just pull the audio if you want to do.
Just pull the sound if you want.
And split them across.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, don't give up. Don't be disheartened. If maybe someone's not got availability, or you haven't got a guest, or maybe not very many people have listened, I think it's important, because if you keep going, that momentum will build. The more people that share it about, it can gain traction. It only takes one episode to kind of take off and for people to listen. At the end of the day, if the people listening are the ones who it really matters to and they're really interested, then it doesn't really matter. And at the end of the day, kind of any engagement and any kind of getting out there is good.
I really appreciate you coming. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate the invite.
I wish your podcast huge success.
Thank you.
And I will see you again soon, obviously somewhere in the UK.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Chris.